The Convergence. Ambassador Kavak stood motionless on the bridge of the eternal light, his iridescent scales shifting from their usual confident gold to an uncertain blue-green. After 3 centuries of first contact missions, he had thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. "Ambassador," croaked Junior Analyst Searle from the deck, their neural interface still smoking slightly. "The readings. They don't make sense. They can't make sense." Kavak gestured to the medical team who rushed to attend to the fallen analyst. The young Zak's neural overload was concerning, but what worried Kavak more was what it had caused. He turned to face the main view screen, studying the deceptively simple vessels that orbited the blue-green world before them. "Show me the sensor logs," he commanded, his secondary hearts beginning to beat faster. The holographic display materialized before him, showing what appeared to be absurdly primitive spacecraft, radio waves, chemical propulsion, and metal hulls that wouldn't withstand a single shot from even their most basic weapons. It was exactly what they'd expected to find after detecting the planet's broadcasts. Exactly what they'd prepared for, too, exactly. "Supreme Commander Aral," Kavash called out, his voice carefully controlled. "Would you join me for a moment?" The imposing military leader strode forward, her battle-scarred scales a deep crimson of barely contained aggression. "Ambassador, we're wasting time. These primitives barely have orbital capabilities. Standard protocol dictates." "Look at this energy reading," Kavak interrupted, zooming in on a particular data stream. Aral's scales flickered in annoyance, then shifted to pale yellow surprise. "That's impossible. The pattern is too perfect." Kavak manipulated the display, overlaying multiple sensor readings. "Every reading we're getting is exactly what we'd expect from a developing spacefaring race. Not a single deviation. Not one anomaly. In 300 years of first contact missions, I've never seen anything so perfect." A sudden burst of static filled the bridge's speakers. "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer. "It's primitive radio waves, just as we expected." Aral's scales flushed deep red again. "It's a trap." "Not a trap," Kavak cut her off. "A test." He stepped closer to the view screen, studying what appeared to be a simple medical vessel. Its hull was scratched, its paint faded, its design utterly utilitarian. Yet something about it made his ancestral instincts scream danger. "They're testing how we'll react," he continued. "Everything we're seeing is deliberate. They're showing us exactly what we expected to see. The question is, what are they hiding?" As if in answer, their sensors briefly glitched just for a microsecond. In that instant, Kavak caught a glimpse of something else. Energy readings that defied physics, hull compositions that shouldn't exist, and power signatures that made their mighty, diplomatic fleet look like children's toys. Then it was gone, replaced once again by the perfect facade of a primitive fleet. Kavak turned to Aral, his scales settling into a determined purple gold. "Supreme Commander, I believe we may need to reconsider our approach. We're not dealing with primitives. We're dealing with masters of deception." "Your orders, Ambassador?" Aral's scales showed internal conflict, pride warring with survival. Kavak's response was decisive. "Send our response. But pray we haven't already made a terrible mistake in our assumptions." Lieutenant Sarah Chen's fingers hovered over the holographic controls of the UES Nightingale, her expression carefully neutral despite the sweat beading on her forehead. The ship's true combat interface lay dormant beneath the fake medical console, ready to activate at a moment's notice. "They're scanning us again," reported her XO. Commander James Rodriguez, his voice low. "Third sweep in the last hour. The Zak Authority are nothing if not thorough." Sarah nodded, maintaining the appearance of a somewhat nervous medical ship captain. "Status of the masking systems. Holding perfectly. As far as they can tell, we're just a converted passenger liner with some basic medical equipment." James paused, checking another reading. Though their young officer, the one with the greenish scales, seems particularly interested in Bay 4, Sarah's jaw tightened. Bay 4 housed the Nightingale's quantum torpedo assembly, disguised as a regenerative medicine facility. The masking technology would hold, but the young alien's persistence was concerning. The bridge door hissed open, admitting their guests. Ambassador Kavak led the group, his scales shifting through subtle shades of blue and gold. Behind him, a younger officer practically vibrated with barely contained excitement. "Captain Chen," Kavach's translator produced perfect English. Thank you for hosting us. Junior Specialist Mir here is particularly interested in your medical capabilities. Of course, Sarah smiled, years of diplomatic training keeping her voice steady. Though I should warn you, our facilities are quite modest compared to your advanced technology. Mir's scales flickered with what Sarah's psyop sight. Training identified as barely suppressed smugness. Actually, Captain, I have some questions about the energy readings from your medical bay. They're unusual for healing equipment. Sarah kept her tone curious but slightly worried. Unusual? I hope there's nothing wrong with our equipment. We recently upgraded our diagnostic imaging systems, but the integration hasn't been entirely smooth. Mir moved closer to one of the medical displays. Their scales now showing patterns of intense concentration. These power fluctuations, they're remarkably similar to what we'd expect from a controlled quantum reaction, not a medical scanner. Behind the alien delegation, James' hand slowly moved toward the hidden weapons release. Sarah caught his eye and gave a microscopic headshake. Not yet. Quantum reaction? Sarah let confusion color her voice. I'm afraid Earth's understanding of quantum mechanics is still quite basic. Our medical technology relies primarily on traditional imaging methods, magnetic resonance, radiation sonic mapping. Ambassador Kavach placed a restraining hand on Mir's shoulder, his scales showing embarrassment. My apologies, Captain. Mir is young and enthusiastic. Mir's scales dulled to a chastised gray. My apologies, Ambassador. Sarah waved away the apology. Would you like to see our primary care unit? We've recently updated our trauma response protocols. As she led the delegation through the ship's medical facilities, Sarah exchanged a knowing look with James. The Zakthari weren't as convinced of human technological inferiority as they pretended to be, and humans weren't as primitive as they appeared. It was going to be an interesting diplomatic mission indeed. Supreme Commander Errol stood proudly on the command deck of the Zakthari flagship. The Eternal Dominion. The vessel represented the pinnacle of their civilization's military might, 3 kilometers of advanced alloys and cutting-edge weaponry. Your attention, Earth representatives, she announced to the human delegation. We will now demonstrate the capabilities of our latest Mark Thay and Mural link combat system. Lieutenant Chen and her small group watched from the observation deck, their expressions appropriately awed yet ignoring. It allows for instant response times. Errol continued, her scales rippling with pride. No other known civilization has achieved such perfect synchronization between ship and crew. David Kamar, the youngest of the human officers, raised his hand, a gesture that made several Zakthari officers' scales flicker with amusement at its childlike simplicity. Supreme Commander, may I ask a technical question? Errol's scales showed indulgent superiority. Of course, young one. Have you solved the quantum desynchronization problem in the neural pathway? The one that occurs when multiple operators access the same combat subsystem. The command deck fell silent. Errol's scales shifted from confident gold to surprise yellow so fast it must have been painful. How do you know about that? Demanded Mir, who had been watching the humans like a hawk since the medical bay incident. David blinked innocently. Oh, it's just basic neural interface theory. We encountered similar issues in our early attempts at direct neural links. The quantum states collapse when… Mir's interruption cut through the tension. That's not possible. Your species barely has spaceflight. You can't possibly… A sudden alarm blared. Asteroid on collision course. A Zakthari officer shouted. Impact in 30 seconds. Neural interface loading, Errol commanded, her scales now ash-gray with fear. Loading. System crash? The Eternal Dominion's engines flared, but the ship's bulk made it move with agonizing slowness. Then something impossible happened. The UES Nightingale, supposedly a converted medical ship, moved not with the clumsy chemical thrusters it had shown before, but with an elegant precision that defied physics. The vessel split into 3 distinct sections, each moving independently yet in perfect coordination. What in the name of the first egg? Mir breathed, their scales showing a complex mixture of awe and professional jealousy. The Nightingale section surrounded the asteroid and, for a brief moment, reality itself seemed to bend. A gravitational lens formed between the 3 segments, and the asteroid simply ceased to exist. converted to harmless energy that dissipated into space. The Nightingale reassembled itself once again, appearing as nothing more than a humble medical ship. But everyone present knew just how much of a facade that was. "Lieutenant Chen to all vessels," Sarah announced. "Threat neutralized. Ambassador Kavak, would your security forces like to handle the prisoner transfer?" Kavak's scales showed amused respect. "Of course, Lieutenant. Though I believe we would be very interested in discussing mutual defense arrangements after this demonstration." "Naturally," Sarah replied with a small smile. "Though I should warn you, what you've seen today is barely scratched the surface of what humanity's ships can do." From his station, David grinned at Mir's color-shifting scales. "Want me to explain how the phase shifting works? The math is beautiful, especially the parts about quantum probability manipulation. The orbital shipyard above Earth materialized slowly through the quantum tunnel, its true form causing Mir's scales to shift through every shade of astonishment. What had appeared from a distance as a simple construction facility was actually a massive crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Welcome to Genesis Point," Lieutenant Chen announced to the Zakthari delegation, humanity's primary research and development facility. Kavak studied the impossible geometry before them, his scales a deep blue of intellectual fascination. "Those patterns, they're self-replicating on a quantum level. Notice that, did you?" David grinned from his console. "The whole station is actually a single living quantum computer. It evolves and adapts its own structure based on what we're designing." The simulation shifted, showing other catastrophes, solar flares that should have sterilized the planet, dimensional rifts that threatened to tear reality apart, and threats that the Zakthari had no context to even comprehend. "Computer, show them the Lazarus Protocol," Sarah commanded. The air rippled again, revealing a massive chamber where ships were quite literally being grown, rather than built. Crystalline structures extended like branches, each one eventually forming into a fully functional vessel. "By the first egg," Kavak breathed. "They're not just alive, they're reproducing." "In a manner of speaking," David confirmed. "Each ship contains genetic memory from every threat humanity has faced. They're born knowing how to adapt to almost any situation." The Nightingale, Mir's scales showed both horror and curiosity. "She's a 53rd generation vessel. Her grandmother survived the reality wars. Let's save that story for another time," Sarah interjected. "The point is, everything you see here was developed for one purpose: survival. We didn't set out to become the most technologically advanced species in known space. We just couldn't afford not to be." They approached a viewing window overlooking a testing chamber, where a new ship was being put through its paces, its form shifting between configurations faster than the eye could follow. "That's the next generation," David explained proudly. "They can rewrite local physics on an even smaller scale. We're hoping to eliminate the need for weapons entirely, just temporarily suspend the laws of physics inside enemy vessels until they surrender." Kavak's scales shifted to a deep purple of respect and concern. "Your species, you're not just ahead of us technologically. You're operating on an entirely different level of existence." "Maybe," Sarah acknowledged, "but we're still human. We still make mistakes, still feel fear, still hope for peace. That's why we maintain the facade of simple vessels and basic technology. We don't want to frighten potential allies or provoke potential enemies." A sudden alert caught their attention on a nearby quantum display. A ship in the testing chamber had just achieved something new. It had created a stable pocket universe inside its hull. "Oh, wow," David exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "That's new. Want me to explain how it works? It involves some fascinating applications of string theory." As the young officer launched into another enthusiastic explanation, Sarah noticed both fear and fascination in their guest's scale patterns. The Zakthari were finally beginning to understand that humanity's ships weren't just vessels of war or exploration. They were the physical embodiment of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to turn existential threats into opportunities for growth. The warning came from the Eternal, Dominion's quantum sensors, technology recently modified with human insights. A fleet of Zakthari warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hull markings identifying them as belonging to the purist sect, a radical religious faction. Blasphemers. The transmission cut across all frequencies. You dare to corrupt our sacred technology with human abominations. Kavak's scales had shifted to a sickly gray. Friends of yours? The purist sect, Kavash explained, his voice tight. They believe technological advancement should follow a predetermined divine path. What you've shown us, they would consider it an affront to their gods. The lead purist vessel launched a barrage of quantum-tipped warheads, weapons that could shred reality itself. Nightingale, Sarah called out, addressing her ship directly through their quantum link. Time to show them something really blasphemous. Initiate Prome Protocol. The medical ship's response wasn't in words, but in action. Its hull began to glow with an inner light that seemed to bend, rainbow colors into impossible new hues. Similar transformations rippled through the other Earth vessels. What are they doing? Mir demanded, her scales flickering between fascination and fear as she monitored the sensors. These energy readings. They're rewriting quantum probability itself. David explained, his fingers dancing across his console. We're just convincing local space-time that the warheads have a 0% chance of existing. Quantum probability manipulation on a macro scale. The warhead simply winked out of existence. No explosion, no debris, not even radiation. They had simply become one of the universe's many unrealized possibilities. The purist fleet responded by charging their main weapons. Planet killers capable of reducing worlds to atomic ash. Heretics, their leader screamed. Die with the honor you have forsaken. Errol's scales showed genuine concern. Even your advanced technology can't... Watch, Sarah said softly. Nightingale Phase 2. The Earth ships moved in perfect synchronization, their transformed hulls creating a pattern that hurt to look at with normal vision. Reality seemed to hiccup, and suddenly the purist fleet found themselves trapped inside. A localized time dilation field. Their weapons are still charging, Sarah explained calmly. They're just doing it at 1/1,000,000th normal speed. Gives us time to talk. From the purist vessel's perspective, only microseconds had passed. To everyone else, they appeared frozen in space, caught in the act of their attempted genocide. You could destroy them, Kavak observed, his scales showing a complex mixture of emotions. Why don't you? Sarah's expression softened. Because that's not who we are. Computer, establish quantum connection with purist fleet consciousness cores, she commanded. Consciousness cores? Mir's scales rippled in surprise. Their ships don't have... They do now, David grinned. We just quantum evolved their computer cores. About 300 years into the future. Give it a minute. The purist vessels suddenly powered down their weapons, their ship systems having literally become too advanced to be used for destruction, having evolved past the need for violence. This is what we do, Sarah explained to their stunned audience. We